The last vivid memory I can recall was walking across campus toward my apartment after my morning classes. I remember being in a good mood and had nothing to complain about. The weather was nicer than I would have expected in the middle of October. It was sunny as ever, warm, and calm save for a light breeze of cool and refreshing air, carrying with it the comforting scent of autumn. The sound of crunching leaves was replaced by my boots meeting the concrete beneath them as I took my final steps from the sidewalk into the crosswalk. And then pain. Pain was about all I can remember after that, and it was everywhere. I can't recall what I saw, where I was, or what happened. A few screams filled the air around me, but I couldn't be sure if they were real or if they were a part of some twisted nightmare. I can faintly remember voices here and there. Between the voids of nothingness, I can only assume to be me falling unconscious. What they were talking about is a blur to me. I perceive very little time passing, minutes at most, and for that, I am immeasurably grateful. At the time I remember being awake, my entire body was in pure agony. My legs, my arms, my back, you name it. I knew whatever happened to me had done a hell of a lot of damage at the very least. To my surprise, when I had finally awoken, the pain in my body seemed to have subsided. The exception was the pounding headache that accompanied me into consciousness. The incessant buzzing of whatever light fixture must have been on the ceiling agitated me further. Now I could at least tell that I was in what I presumed to be a hospital bed. I let out a grunt as I unsuccessfully attempted to open my eyes in the brightly lit room. I quickly learned I wasn't alone. Upon uttering my grunt, footsteps approached my bedside before the vision through my eyelids was darkened. A cold, fresh towel was gently laid over my face, somewhat quieting the annoying ambient noise of the lights. "There you are, dear. Just relax now." An exceptionally calming, welcoming, and mature voice of a woman whispered to me, something that caught me off guard. I attempted to thank her, though my voice was so dry and coarse that only a sad, incoherent groan escaped. I heard a few more footsteps move away, and then toward me again before the woman asked, "Sit up for me, dear. Will you?" I did as she asked while she gently kept the towel applied to my face with her hand, so as to not let it fall. A paper cup met my cracked lips and tilted as cold water entered my mouth. The sensation was so blissful it caused me to reach up with my own hands to tilt the cup further, pouring the entirety of the water down my throat. I let out a long sigh of relief after the cup had been emptied. "Thank you," I uttered, lowering my head back to the pillow. My throat, though better, still sounded drained and worn as I spoke. The woman gently removed her hand from the towel on my face. I heard her walk away again, the sound of tools or medical equipment being moved following behind her footsteps. A moment later, she returned and gently grabbed my arm at the elbow. "I'll just need a little blood sample, dear. It won't hurt a bit," she told me, raising my limp arm slowly off of the bed. "Oh," I replied, hesitant due to the cloud of confusion that still engulfed me rather than fear. Fear didn't seem like a possible emotion right then. I didn't know a thing about this woman, but her presence commanded trust and comfort. I felt the needle be inserted into my arm, and though it stung a little, it wasn't nearly as bad as I expected. This is when it finally occurred to me that I truly had no idea what was going on. "Wait, where am I? Am I in a hospital? What happened? Who are you?" I asked. The hint of panic in my voice grew with each question. I felt the needle exit my arm, followed by the woman wiping and bandaging it. Her soft touch alone was enough to cease my panic. "Yes, you were in a hospital. You were hit by a driver who was going far too fast through that little crosswalk, it would seem, and I am Dr. Wernicke. I have been assigned to care for you until your release," she answered. Her last remark was filled with excitement, a clear indication she felt happy for me being able to leave soon. I felt a bit happy upon hearing such news, though I couldn't tell for sure if that's how I should feel. Being in a hospital in the first place was just as new information. More than anything, I felt tired and annoyed by my damn headache. Feeling a bit more comfortable with my now supposed doctor, I felt inclined to tell her, "Dr. Wernicke, I have a raging headache." I managed to squeeze out, "Do you think I could?" "No worries at all, dear." She cut me off. Once again, she had me momentarily sit up before placing a small pill in my hand which I swallowed, followed by another cup of water. The headaches are to be expected, unfortunately, but if I'm being honest, I believe you're lucky that's the extent of what's wrong with you. Hell, you might be the luckiest patient I've ever seen. When you first came in, you were banged up and bruised pretty bad. Sure, but we didn't find a single broken bone in your body. No organs were damaged. No severe internal bleeding. Nothing. Everything seemed to be just fine. Again, I didn't know how I should be processing this. From the way she described it, it sounded as though the accident should have killed me. Before I could ask another question, Dr. Wernicke spoke up. Now, that pill will help with the headache, but it'll make you feel quite drowsy, quite quickly. All I need you to do is take a good, long sleep. Can you do that for me, William? Her use of my name caught me off guard, but after thinking for a whole 2 seconds, it made sense that the doctor assigned to look after me would be familiar with my name. I simply nodded in response to her question. She let a light chuckle out before remarking. I heard her footsteps leave my bedside and travel across the room. A light switch was flipped off, ceasing the annoying ambient buzz. A door was open and closed as she stepped out of the room, and I was left alone in the silence. Dr. Wernicke wasn't wrong. The med she gave me put me to sleep within a minute. I hadn't even been given a waking moment to process everything I had just been told, but I didn't mind that much. I slept hard. For how long? I haven't the slightest idea. The first thing I noticed upon awakening was the absence of my headache, and what a relief it was. I must have remained lying still in the hospital bed for half an hour or so before I decided to remove the now dry towel, sit up, and open my eyes. I half expected my movement to be restricted by some sort of tubes or medical apparatuses, but surprisingly no. There was no catheter, and nothing taped to my skin to monitor my heart rate. The only unsurprising thing was the light blue medical gown I donned. I twisted my hips to the side, dangling my legs over the side of the bed, and turning to look around the room. I couldn't see anything. I slowly pushed myself off the bed, letting my feet contact the cold, hard floor. Standing up and walking especially felt odd, as if I hadn't done it in a long time, and well, maybe I hadn't. I carefully stepped in the direction I remembered Dr. Wernicke walking when she left the room, arms stretched out in front of me to feel anything I might run into. Eventually, I found a wall and followed it to a door. The handle refused to open. I traced my hands around the door until I finally found a switch, flipping it on with excitement. The sight before me, though familiar at first, seemed to become more uncanny the further I observed. Yes, this was a hospital room of some kind, but not like it should have been. It was both old and new at the same time. Old in the sense that almost nothing in there looked like it belonged in this century, save for the box of gloves and hand sanitizer, and new in the sense that it almost felt as though I was the one in the wrong century. The green and white tiled floors, bland stone walls, and monocolored ceiling looked more like the kind you would expect to see in an abandoned building, one full of dust and mold, infested with roaches and rats. This room had none of that. Everything looked as new and clean as if it were built yesterday. Even my bed was perceivably of an older design, and an extremely minimalist one at that. Other than my bed, the room overall felt empty, even with how small it was. Right beside my bed was a metal table with several medical instruments, the names of which I would never be able to tell you, along with a very modern-looking box of medical gloves and a large bottle of hand sanitizer I had mentioned earlier. Additionally, there was a small prescription bottle of pills. Though unlike any prescription bottle I had seen before, this one was devoid of any labels or stickers at all. My initial thought was one of concern, though I trusted Dr. Wernicke knew what she was doing. Next to the table was a small trash can and a large sink with a faucet, and on its edge sat a stack of paper cups. The opposite wall to my bed had another door, the only other one connected to the room. Not having tried to open this one, I thought I should give it a shot. To my relief, the other side was a small bathroom. Like my room, this bathroom was spotless and equipped with a toilet, sink, and shower. Much like the main room, the bathroom had a few little details that gave away the fact that I hadn't been taken back in time, like the unopened packages of soap bars or the automatic paper towel dispenser. Needless to say, having been asleep in a hospital for an unspecified amount of time, I was in desperate need to relieve myself. After finishing up my business and leaving the bathroom, I paced around my hospital room for a minute or two before coming to another realization. Wasn't there supposed to be a button to push to call a nurse over in case I needed something? And with the lack of heart monitors, or anything to indicate if I was all right or not, How would anyone know? This line of internal questioning made me curious about what was on the other side of that door. The first one, the one next to the light switch. The one I knew Dr. Wernicke must have left out of. I approached, and once again attempted and failed to open it. It was clearly locked, but from the outside. There was no locking mechanism I could control on this side of the door, only a keyhole. After fidgeting with the handle a few more times, I decided to give up for now, though I began to feel a sense of frustration and concern about my situation. I turned back towards my bed and took no more than a few steps before the door swung open from behind me, causing me to jump and let out an audible scream out of fright. I turned to see a woman no older than her late 20s in the doorway. She stood at about 5 feet 4 inches with an average build in a white, very old-fashioned looking hospital uniform. She had dark hair tied up in a bun and gorgeous green eyes that matched the rest of her looks. She also carried a small, rectangular wooden box in her right hand. On that same wrist, she wore a little brown watch. This must be one of the nurses here, I thought. Her immediate reaction to seeing me was to form a warm smile. "There's nothing to be scared of, dear. It's just me," came Dr. Wernicke's voice, teasing me for being so jumpy. Once again, I was surprised. I would never have imagined that the mature voice I remembered hearing earlier had come from the woman standing before me. They simply didn't seem as though they would match. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, stepping back to the hospital bed and taking a seat on the edge. "It's good to see you're up and walking again. Is the headache still there?" she inquired, approaching the metal table and setting down her wooden box. No, actually it seems to be gone. "Thank you," I replied. "That's good, very good. If it ever gets real bad again, go ahead and take one of these pills here. But just one, okay?" she asked, now having put gloves on before opening the wooden box and pulling out a syringe. "Yes, sure. What's that for?" I failed to hide the slight hint of fear in my voice. "Well, luckily for you, the medication we used to fix you up after that accident worked like a charm. Unfortunately, it does require that we take a new blood sample every 12 hours to monitor its effects and make sure you're all good to go. That's why we need to keep you here for just a couple more days. Does that make sense, dear?" she replied, looking over at me for my affirmation of what she said. However, something didn't make sense to me. What medications would they have needed to use on me if there was nothing wrong with me in the first place? Or did I get hurt? This answer seemed to contradict what she told me last time. I'm no doctor myself, but it didn't seem responsible to me for a hospital to risk a drug dangerous enough that it needs blood monitoring over days on end to patch up a patient with a little bruising. I could tell Dr. Wernicke saw the gears turning in my head because she quickly walked over to me and grabbed my arm. As soon as she did, I let my curiosity go. She knew what she was doing, I thought. What do I know about medicine anyway? I'm sure the blood samples aren't a big deal. After she had finished taking my blood sample, she applied a new bandage. She carefully placed the syringe back into the wooden box and closed the lid, then turned back to me while she took her gloves off. "All right, dear. I know you're probably a little bored and maybe a bit hungry. I'll see what I can do about getting you out of this room and finding you some food. I'll just have to dash." She stopped mid-sentence upon glancing at her watch. Her smiley face faded to a serious one momentarily, like a mask that had almost fallen off before she caught it and readjusted it back to her head. She looked at me once more and forced a smile. "I just remembered something," she noted, before quickly turning to the door and speed walking out with her wooden box, adding, "I'll be right back, dear," as she shut the door behind her. I sat for a moment and again pondered what she told me. It still didn't make any sense. What somewhat alarmed me even more was how quickly I wrote off my skepticism. What was I thinking? I should have asked her about that. Why didn't I? I should have pressed her for more information. My thoughts and emotions brewed, causing me to stand up and pace around the room for a second. Why wouldn't she be taking my blood pressure too? Why, if this drug had such negative implications that needed monitoring, wouldn't she have me hooked up to something to monitor my heart rate? My back and forth pacing placed me in front of the door again. I reached out and pulled the handle down, and to my surprise, it moved this time. If Dr. Wernicke had intended to lock the room last time, this time she had certainly forgotten. I ceased my pacing and pulled the door open, revealing a long corridor. The interior of this hallway matched my room precisely, with the tiled floors, bland walls, and ceiling, with the same old, noisy light fixtures and uncanny cleanliness that tied it together. My room sat at the end of the hallway. 5 doors occupied each side, for a total of 10. Each door was the same, metal, heavy-looking, and light blue in color. They were all spaced evenly and far apart across the long hallway. At the opposite end of the hall was an elevator door, once again, breaking the immersion of feeling like I was in a 100-year-old building with how blatantly modern it looked. I pulled the door fully open and stepped out of my room. I knew I probably shouldn't be out here, but with how quickly fed up I had gotten by a lack of sufficient answers and things not making sense in general, I was determined to find out something, anything, other than the constant ambient noise the lights provided. The noise of my bare feet stepping on the hard floor was the only thing that broke the silence, something that I was hyper-aware of as I attempted to move down the hallway as quietly as possible, even keeping my breathing to a minimum to avoid being heard. It took me a while to reach the other end of the hallway at such a slow pace, and it felt even longer. Though, once I had reached the end, I didn't know what to do. There was nowhere for me to go in here. I momentarily considered using the elevator. It had both an up and down button, indicating that I wasn't on the lowest floor. I could try going up, I thought, but quickly shot down my idea. I felt somewhat off about leaving my room as it was. The elevator certainly wasn't going to be the first thing I tried. Instead, I began attempting to open each of the metal doors along the hallway. I stuck to the right side as I moved in the direction of my room. The first 3 wouldn't budge, but the 4th did. Before I entered, I turned and scanned the hall, as if waiting for someone to come and stop me. I pulled the door fully open, quickly stepping inside and pulling it quietly shut behind me. This room appeared to be the same size and style as my room, though it didn't appear to have its own bathroom or any other connected rooms as mine did. This room had a single metal table in its center, and its contents made my heart sink upon seeing them. On top of it were all of my personal belongings: my backpack, clothes, boots, keys, wallet, and phone, all spaced out, as if they were being displayed like a museum attraction. I knew for certain this wasn't a normal hospital procedure. The first thing I grabbed was my phone, which still had a 67% battery and full bars, something that excited and confused me at the same time. I didn't take time to consider it. I needed to act. I ignored the endless list of notifications and immediately swiped to the emergency call menu and dialed 911. After which, I impatiently waited, darting my eyes around the room, at my belongings, at my phone, and at the door. 911. What is your emergency? I half expected the call not to go through, but I was more than happy that it did. I think I've been kidnapped, I whispered into the phone, immediately aware of how much my speaking had broken the silence of this place. I continued, cutting off the operator before I could hear her next question. I think I was hit by a car. I know something happened, I don't know when, but I woke up in this hospital, but I'm not sure if it is a hospital. There's a woman here claiming to be a doctor. She might be, but she left me locked in a room by myself. She said her name is Dr. Wernicke. I don't know what's going on at all. I whispered further into the phone. The pace of my speech was quickened by frightful haste as I continued to speak. As the words escaped my mouth, I reconsidered if calling 911 was the best idea. The more I spoke, the less sense I made, and more importantly, the less it sounded like my situation was an emergency. Then again, I was reminded of the sight in front of me. I had pinched my phone between my cheek and shoulder while I changed out of the hospital gown and into my clothes, throwing the rest of my belongings into my backpack. I need you to calm down, sir. Can you tell me your name? The operator asked. My name is William Dash. Before I could include my last name, I stopped as I heard the line go silent. I stopped lacing my boots for a moment, and my heart skipped a beat. Well, what the hell? What the hell? I muttered under my breath, which had quickly become increasingly quicker. Was I just abandoned by 911? This couldn't be right. I began to hyperventilate. However, my breathing again ceased for a moment when I heard a few beeps play through the call. I hadn't been hung up on. William, I need you to listen to my instructions very carefully. Can you hear me? The deep, booming voice of a man asked. Why, yes. Wait, what? Who are you? What happened to the other operator? I questioned. The regular emergency services can't help you, but we can. The situation you're in is beyond your understanding. The woman you know as Dr. Wernicke isn't a woman at all, or a doctor. Not anymore anyway. Do not trust her, understand? And no matter what, Do not let her touch you," the booming voice on the other end commanded. Though his speech was quick, it was also calm and collected. Although, the last thing he said sent a shiver down my spine. "What happens if she touches me?" I asked, knowing full well she already had more than a few times. "We know she's touched you before, don't panic. Her effects only last as long as her contact with you. What you need to know is that as long as she has a hold of someone, she has power over them. She can make you do whatever she wants. Even your thoughts will bend to her will. Listen, William, I know you can't move much, but I need you to give me an idea of where you are." I quietly exited the room where I had found my belongings and entered the hallway, listening to the operator with one ear and trying to stay vigilant about anything I might hear with the other. I frantically walked around to each door, trying to open all of the ones I hadn't tried already. All the while, I tried to explain everything I had seen to the operator. I woke up in a room at the end of a hallway. There are 10 other doors, and at the other end is an elevator of some sort. I don't know what's up with this place. It looks like, I don't know, an insane asylum from the 30s or something. But it's all clean and new, and, to my relief and excitement, the latch on the very last door of the other wall gave way, and I was able to pull it open to reveal a stairwell on the other side. Oh, thank God. I cut myself off, losing focus from my conversation with the operator. Just then, a beeping noise and the sound of something heavy moving was audible to my left. The elevator. The numbers on the screen above it were descending. I ran inside and pulled the metal door shut behind me. "William, William," I heard the operator scream. I fumbled my phone in an attempt to raise it back to my ear and dropped it. Upon picking it up, my shaking fingertips danced around the screen, and to my horror, I saw myself hang up. My phone went silent. "No, no, no, no," I mumbled to myself, though I ceased making any noise once I heard the ding of the elevator door opening. A pair of chattering voices echoed through the hall and into the stairwell. "It's been a slow week. Just spare me this catch. Besides, you seem to have no trouble finding new mice to play with," spoke a man's voice, his demeanor that of a businessman attempting to reach terms for a deal. "You've already gotten plenty from me. And of all the ones you could have asked for, this is the one you are most certainly not getting." Dr. Wernicke shot back angrily, a tone I hadn't heard from her before. She was fed up with whoever she was talking to. I slowly took one step at a time up the stairs, hoping that their conversation was enough of a distraction. The man's reply was as calm as he was previously. "The others are hungry. They are becoming ravenous for a taste. You know as well as I that if we do not meet their demand, they're your responsibility, and I don't want to hear it. I am months away from completing my development. Months. This one here is the most promising yet." The answer is once again no, as it has been for the entirety of this conversation. Dr. Wernicke cut the man off, her voice growing in anger by the second. She continued, "And one more thing. Convenience stores, apartment buildings, the back of grocery stores, I don't care. Hunt where you want, but stay the hell out of my territory." I had nearly climbed the first flight of stairs by this point, and the conversation had gotten quieter, though I heard Dr. Wernicke say one last thing, this time speaking calmly. "If I catch you again, well, I think we both know." She followed up with a sinister chuckle, as if she had made a light-hearted joke. I felt my blood go cold, but kept moving up the second flight of stairs until I reached the next door, labeled as the first floor. The sight before me came as an immediate relief. I found myself in the halls of a very modern-looking hospital. From the floor to the ceiling, everything looked as you would expect the interior of a hospital to look, how it should look. Even brand-new medical equipment was scattered about the way you expect it to be in a busy hospital. The only problem that remained, one that took me a moment of wandering the empty halls to take note of, was that I was still alone. Someone was keeping the lights on. Someone had to have swept the floor for it to be as clean as it was. And yet, there wasn't a person in sight. No patients, no nurses, no doctors. Nobody but me. Though the feeling of being this alone was haunting enough, the worst fear came from knowing that I wasn't. Dr. Wernicke was still here, and she had to have discovered my escape by now. This thought provoked me to quickly snatch the phone from my pocket and pick up my pace, moving around each corner as quickly as I could, searching for directions, an exit, or anything that could tell me how to get out. Unfortunately, my headache from before had begun to make its return as well, something I tried to ignore as I kept moving. Between long strides, I opened my phone and redialed 911 in hopes of reaching the same operator. The call was picked up within a second of ringing. "William, are you there?" The same booming voice asked, a surprisingly comforting thing to hear. "Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I accidentally hung up, and then Dr. Wersick came back. She was talking to some man. They were arguing about something." I spoke, this time a bit louder yet clearer than last time. I was more concerned with finding a fast exit than anything else at this point. How did you escape? And what man? What did he look like?" No, that doesn't matter. Listen, in order to get out, you need to go through the elevator. Take it when you can." I felt frustrated at the operator's instructions. "I can't use the elevator. That's where Dr. Wernicke and whoever the hell she was with came from. I got lucky enough that they haven't found me yet." "All right, William the first, understand. Listen, there's no way for you to get out of there without going through the elevator." "What the hell does that even mean?" I said, nearly yelling through the phone and cutting the operator off. "Listen to me," he commanded back. I rolled my eyes a little but stopped, becoming aware of my stupidity. He continued, "I need you to lie low, stay out of sight if you can. It's a miracle that she left your phone within reach in the first place, but as long as you keep the call connected, we should be able to find your location. We nearly had it last time, but the call wasn't connected for long enough. Once we have it, we'll be sending in the 2 teams we have on standby. They're going to get you out of there. You're going to be all right, William, and soon." Although I found his last comments hard to believe, I had an instinctual trust in them. I believed him. I rounded another corner, determined to find a good spot far enough away from that hellhole of a basement, far enough that she wouldn't find me. "Oh dear, where are you running off to? And who are you talking to?" Dr. Wernicke's voice called from behind me, almost playfully. I froze in place, my body feeling rigid and cold. I recalled what the operator had told me. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and slowly turned to face her. She stood about 30 feet down the hall, smiling at me, though the intention behind her deceptive face was clear to me now. "Why don't you come back to your room, dear? I brought you some food," she suggested calmly, though my response was nothing but, "What do you want?" She put her hands up defensively, as if to try and calm me down. Her facial expression changed to one of serious concern. She took a step forward. The small act of her getting closer seemed to have triggered my headache to become worse. "Dear, I just want—" "Don't call me that," I shouted. She kept her hands up but still approached slowly. With each step, my pounding headache became worse. I raised a hand to my head to soothe the pain as much as I could, gripping the handle of a hospital bed left in the hallway with the other. William, I think it's time for another pill. You don't look like you feel so good." My fear turned to adrenaline. It might have just been the heat of the moment, but felt like I had a higher sense of awareness. I could feel the blood running through my body with each heartbeat. I heard my painful moans turn to grunts of suppressed rage. If this was my fight or flight response, it would seem my body had chosen fight. I raised my vision to meet Wernicke's eyesight. "Don't touch me," I warned her. Though she kept her defensive body language, I saw her facade of a concerned face fade away, and a grin began to crack from the corner of her mouth, something she tried to hold back. She saw my anger, and she liked it. Though it was quiet, I heard the operator yell through the phone in my pocket, "William, what's happening?" She took yet another step closer. I looked down at the hospital bed I had held on to for support the moment before, the one my hand was still attached to. An idea entered my mind, one that felt alien to me, as if it wasn't me that thought it up. Throw it. It made no sense. The hospital bed before me was a modern one, a big one, the weight of which no one on earth could move with ease, much less throw, though, at that moment, my mind didn't have room for such rational thoughts. I had the urge, and I acted. The corners of my vision darkened, and all audio sensations seemed to quiet down. I adjusted my grip, using both hands this time, lifting the bed above my head in one quick jerk. It wasn't hard, it felt easy, and good if anything. Though Dr. Wernicke's figure was nothing more than a blurry silhouette to me now, I threw the bed in her direction with as much might as I could muster. I screamed upon doing so, and collapsed to my knees. The bed went crashing down the hall with ferocity, though to my misfortune, had narrowly missed Dr. Wernicke. My vision and hearing returned to their normal state, just in time for me to see Dr. Wernicke look at the destruction I had just caused, and then back at me with a wide, tooth-filled grin of satisfaction. She continued her approach, no longer feeling the need to keep her defensive stance. I crumbled from my knees to the floor entirely. Facing up, I began to cry. No, 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 please. I managed to squeeze between sobs. Dr. Wernicke now stood directly over me. Now, dear. I think it is time for another pill, she whispered, reaching a hand towards me. The sound of rapid gunfire broke out in the hallway. Dr. Wernicke retracted her hand and recoiled in pain, accompanied by a scream. I looked past her to briefly get a look at the group of men dressed in tactical gear grouped up at the end of the hallway. The sound of bullets meeting flesh filled the air around me. Splashes of black liquid painted the floor in front of my feet, coming from Dr. Wernicke's back. Quickly, it turned into a puddle. Her stance went from one of being provoked to one of being irritated. After a moment, the gunfire ceased, followed by shouts and the sounds of rifles being reloaded. In the brief few seconds of quiet, Dr. Wernicke made eye contact with me before letting out a long, horrifying screech, one that sounded as if it came from 10 voices rather than one. Her eyeballs seemed to burn up, their contents melting to liquid like wax out of a candle until they were no more. Simultaneously, each one of her pearly white teeth fell out of her mouth, clattering on the floor next to me, some of them landing on me directly. I began to propel myself backward with my feet, distancing myself from Dr. Wernicke's body, which had begun to contort. The sounds of tearing flesh and breaking bones accompanied her sudden, jerking motions. I don't know how, but her bones seemed to protrude from underneath her now stretched skin, which looked as though it were ready to tear at any moment. Her arms, hands, and fingers grew longer, almost touching the ground at their full length. She spun around, exposing her now shot-up back. Little remained for clothing and skin. The only thing I could see were the back of her rib bones and her protruding spine. She charged off in the direction of the men while gunfire continued. I scrambled to my feet and ran in the opposite direction. I ran faster than I ever have, and luckily I seemed to keep it going. I rounded corner after corner, getting as far away from the gunfire as I could. Once I felt I was sufficiently far away, I pulled my phone back out. Luckily, my call had not disconnected this time. I continued running, but raised the phone to my ear. What was that? I yelled through the phone between heavy breaths. William, I need you to stay focused. Can you will yourself back to the elevator? I panicked at the question, knowing full well that I had traveled too far in random directions to remember where the stairwell was to the elevator. I have no idea. Ever since I got out of that stairwell dash. Wait, you climbed stairs? Have you been running this entire time? The operator cut me off to ask. Why, yeah? What about it? I asked hesitantly, stopping in my tracks. William, that's not possible. I felt my heart skip a beat. What do you mean? I asked back, somewhat agitated. There was a pause, and then a deep breath before he answered my question. The gunfire in the background had now ceased. You were admitted to a hospital near your campus 12 days ago, after you were hit by a car. You had over 60 broken bones. Your spinal cord was completely severed, leaving you paralyzed from the waist down. It's not possible that you're walking right now. The operator paused, as if what he just said bewildered even himself. 8 days ago, you were taken from the hospital by that thing that goes by Dr. Wernicke. We know because police found CCTV footage of her taking you. After that, we intervened and have been searching for you since. She's been taking people from hospitals in the Midwest for the last 3 years. At least that's our earliest documented case. Of the few victims we've been able to find, you're the first one that's still alive. Though now, I'm not sure if that's a good thing. The adrenaline rushing through my veins made it almost impossible to stay focused on anything the operator had just told me, though some questions began to formulate. What dash? William, dear? I had been cut off by Dr. Wernicke, who I once again locked eye contact with upon turning towards. Her trashed and tattered uniform, or what was left of it, drooped from the weight of the blood. It was now freshly soaked, and though her body, face, teeth, and eyes seemed to have returned to their normal state. A crimson liquid trailed through the hall behind where she stood. I try to make this easy for you, she continued. All you had to do was stay in your room, sleep, and relax. Wait for them to do their work, she said while eyeing my body up and down. She began to walk towards me on an indirect path. I sidestepped to keep my distance, though my anger and headache had begun to return. I was going to bring you back to the surface once you got better. You're the only one who was a strong enough host, and look at you now. You're all better, thanks to me. I would have brought you back myself, and then you would have been free. No one could ever hurt you again. I hope one day you'll come to see what I've done for you. My headache must have reached its boiling point while I listened to Dr. Wernicke's ramblings, because the further she spoke, the darker my vision got until everything faded to black. After that, I don't recall what happened save for small snippets of stimulation. I remember more sounds of flesh tearing, of more screams and screeches. I remember the cloud of blackness in my vision, receding enough momentarily for me to see the force of something tremendous crack the ground beneath my boots. Mostly, I remember what I felt. I felt euphoria as my fists struck violently, breaking bones, as my hands grabbed a hold of flesh and ripped it apart like meat off of a bone. Before it was over, I remember opening my eyes to the sight of Dr. Wernicke's body being thrown violently through a glass window into the darkness. I woke up on the ground, covered in a puddle of black liquid that had trickled down and seeped between fresh cracks in the floor beneath my body. I sat up, rubbing my eyes while my headache slowly receded. For the next 10 minutes, I wandered back the way I had previously run in the hallway. That was about how long it took before I heard many pairs of boots accompanied by voices coming my way. I dissociated with the reality in front of me. For all I was concerned, the threat was gone. A couple of the soldiers asked me questions about if I had been hurt or needed medical attention. I gave them short answers, still uninterested. I was more interested in listening to the one standing off to the side, talking to someone through his radio. I picked up some of his conversation. The entirety of Team 1 was Kia by hostile entity. We've secured the target. Should we proceed to the extraction site? The man's face went pale, and his eyes drifted towards me as he received a reply from the other side. He gave some sort of hand signal to the rest of the men, who backed away from me before raising the barrels of their guns in my direction. Again, my memory gets hazy here. I know I raised my hands and pleaded for my life. All the while my headache had flared up strong again. I know I heard gunshots all around, and I felt the bullets pierce through my body, but I blacked out even quicker this time. Again, I felt the excitement and pleasure of the destruction I wrought, though the extent of which I am shielded from remembering. When I came to, I had a fresh coat of dark crimson liquid over the black from Wernicke. The men's bodies were in variously sized pieces scattered about the hall. It's been about 12 hours since that last gap in my memory. I've spent that time wandering the halls. I found my cell phone, though it had been smashed to bits in my fight with Wernicke. I've searched every door in this place, but haven't found the stairwell. I'm sure I'll find it sooner or later. I remember what the operator said. I needed the elevator to get out of here, though, like the operator, I'm now considering whether that would be for the best. Whatever I am, it's not what I was the day I got hit by that car. Every once in a while, I'll pass by a window showing the dark emptiness of whatever is outside. They act more like mirrors in this place. I'll stop and stare for a few minutes at a time. Sometimes I'll get a glimpse of the thing that moves under my skin. I'll watch it slither while I think about the same thing over and over. What I did to Wernicke, what I did to those men, the sound of their bones shattering, of their flesh being torn apart. If I stare too long, I can sometimes catch a grin forming on the face of my reflection. God help me if I ever do find that elevator. I liked it, and I want more.